So, good morning, dear community. Today is the 13th of February, the year 2025, and we are in Lower Hamlet, Dharma Nectar Temple of Plum Village. Dharma Nectar, yes. We are in our first day of mindfulness here in Lower Hamlet for the spring retreat. It's also a Thursday, so some of our friends will be leaving tomorrow. And others of us will be staying here, continue to stay here and be a part of the residential community. I have been reflecting these past few weeks a little bit what it means to be in community and what makes a sustainable community. So many thoughts have come up for me, and whichever avenue I explore or go down, I always seem to come back to bodhicitta, or in Buddhism, bodhicitta, it means the mind of love, a kind of fire in our hearts. And when I look at the Plum Village community and its origins, I recognize this fire. The fire in Tae's heart, the fire in Sister Junkong's heart, the fire in many of our elder brothers and sisters who were here from the very beginning, or almost the very beginning of Plum Village. And I can see this fire and I can recognize how alive it is still to this day after 40 years. Or 40-something years. So I'm thinking, I'm 20-something years here. I'm like, how can I keep that for another 20-something years, the fire in my heart? And it really helped me to kind of remember my origin stories. I remember when I first encountered Plum Village, Tae and the Plum Village community through a retreat at called Dharma Mountain Monastery in Vermont. It was the first retreat in that center in the US. And I was fortunate enough to go to that retreat. And I just remember being so impressed, and everything I learned in that retreat was something new to me. How to walk, how to eat, how to listen. The first time ever I was in a circle sharing with other people about stuff that's, you don't share about with your families or friends or things like that. And I remember during the retreat, it was like a spark had been, it was a spark. And then towards the end of the retreat, I felt this flame. It was a slow burning flame. And then I went home from the retreat, and I felt that flame was uncontainable in me. It was as if I had been exposed to kind of a new way of being. And when I came home, I was constantly looking for how do I do this at home, but not knowing how. So maybe naively, I thought, I'm going to pitch a tent and live outside. I'm not going to be indoors anymore. So I actually pitched a tent in my parents' backyard and stayed there for 2 years. And every time it rained, my mother would stick her head out the window and she's like, "Are you crazy?" In Florida, when it rains, it pours. It doesn't rain, it pours. And you have thunder, and you have wind, and sometimes you have, well, I couldn't stay there during a hurricane. I went indoors. But for 2 years, I really stayed in this tent. And it was the need to be closer to nature and sort of away from what I was comfortable or familiar with. And I see, just looking out in this room, I see every one of us has an origin story, whether we are monastic or lay. I can see that just the fact that we are all sitting here together today, there is a fire in our hearts of looking for something, and sometimes we may not even be able to name what we are looking for. And like myself, when I came to the first retreat, I thought I was just attending that retreat because it was in Vermont in the fall, and I thought, I'm just going to go there and enjoy the fall colors, because it'd been many years that I'd enjoy fall, because our family, we moved to Florida, and it's just green all year. So in my mind, I was just thinking, I'm going to go to Vermont and go to this retreat with my cousins and friends who all wanted me to come there. But I'm not going to go for the retreat. I'm just gonna enjoy the foliage in Vermont in that time of year. And it was a good fortune of, I guess, the ancestral forces, spiritual and genetic and land ancestral forces at work, I think, that really led me to that retreat and to discover this practice of mindfulness. And so coming to the retreat, I didn't really know what I was looking for. In fact, I wasn't looking for anything in the retreat. When I was convinced to go on the retreat, the first thing I said was, my cousin, she's like, oh, it's going to be great. You'll have a chance to hang out with a lot of monks and nuns. And my reaction was, why would I want to hang out with monks and nuns? How can you even hang out with monks and nuns? So I had no idea. I had no idea that we could even talk to monks and nuns. I grew up in a Buddhist family, but the relationship, my parents might have had a closer relationship to the monks and nuns passing through the temples at that time, but I felt I was never really able to talk to them. And so coming to Vermont, first thing I discovered was, you can actually talk to monastics. And then, I learned a bunch of other things, like how to walk, how to eat. Everything that was very surprising to me, especially how to recognize my feelings. It's very surprising because I never really learned that in school. Whether elementary, high school, university, there was no course that taught you how to recognize your feelings. I think nowadays our society has evolved, and in university or as well as high schools, elementary schools, there are a lot more available. And when I go home, then I talk to my nieces and nephews who are 7, 8 years old, and they're like, oh, my school has Mindful Mondays now. So then on Mindful Mondays, I have no idea what they do on Mindful Mondays. So I gave my niece a book. Do you want to give this book, Happy Teachers Will Change the World, to your teacher? Because there are many things in there that you can do with children on Mindful Mondays. Anyhow, from what I heard, I didn't know if the teacher knew what Mindful Mondays was. But anyhow, there's this kind of shift I see in our collective consciousness for introducing a bit more spirituality and awareness into what it is to be human. And it's starting very young, so that makes me very happy. But in my first retreat, I didn't have that experience until I came there. And let alone the bigger questions that I had that was kind of percolating in my mind for a long time. Like, who am I? I think all of us, at one point in our lives, we have that question, who am I? And why am I here? And what happens when I die? All those questions, sometimes I can't hear them, but somehow they were burning in the back of my mind for a very, very long time. And because nobody talked about it, I didn't talk about it. You just go on with life as usual. And there are certain measures of success out there. You go to school, you get a degree, you get a career, you get married, you get a house. But then I always asked, and then what? And I always saw my tombstone, rest in peace, Sister Long. My lay name, rest in peace. So in imagining the trajectory of my life, I really never had an answer. I didn't feel like I had an answer to really see what this life was for and the deeper meaning of it. And so questions that were burning in the back of my mind. The last time I came home, it was during my sister's funeral, and I stayed with my family for a while. And I have this nephew. He was 6 at the time. Almost 6, he was 5, 6. And I took a walk with him one day, and he asked me, Shiko, meaning sister, do you know what happens when we die? And I was like, what can I say to a 6-year-old, to a 5-year-old? But then he continued, a good thing. He's like, because I think about that every day. And this is a 5-year-old asking me, do you know what happens when we die? And I think about it every day because, of course, he had just experienced one of the biggest losses in his life with my sister, his aunt, the passing of his aunt. So, and then at the moment, I saw, this question is going to percolate in his mind for the rest of his life. Until, he has good enough conditions to help him to look deeply into it and to make a breakthrough. And so he said, because I think about that every day. And I said, well, that's wonderful, that you think about it every day. And I said, it's something that we can continue to think about. Anyhow, I was stuck in explaining to a 5-year-old what it means to live or die. Slowly, we in the funeral there were some chanting sessions where we spoke about interbeing or continuation, and that you can find your loved one, like a cloud. It's not just a cloud forever, but it becomes the rain, the rivers, the ocean. It becomes the trees, the grass, the vegetation. We drink tea, the cloud becomes us at one point. So he heard a lot of these kinds of teachings during those chanting sessions. And then one day when I was hanging out with him in the backyard, and he saw a ladybug, and it was crawling on his hand. And he remembered that there were many moments when he and his aunt played with ladybugs in the backyard. And then he looked at the ladybug and he said, "Oh, I wonder if this is my aunt visiting me." So, in a way, he was starting to get the insight of, I'm not sure if it's insight, but in a way he was trying to navigate what happens when we die, and to a little bit touch what it means to continue, touch a little bit continuation. So going back to this fire in our heart and this desire to really understand deeply our lives and our environment, I think is the beginning of the building, community building, and I see that the other part of having the fire is also the commitment to keeping this flame of discovery, this flame of seeking alive in me. And I see how important it is, because otherwise I kind of lose sight of what's important. In the beginning years of Plum Village, the beds were like cinder blocks, and you had a piece of plywood, and then you sleep on a sleeping bag. There's no bed. There's cinder blocks and plywood. And I saw the old building that we have here in that's taken down already, and also the one that just burned down 3 weeks ago. That was how the beds were in those buildings in the beginning. And yet there was so much happiness, and Plum Village was able to be built up. But I see that everyone who came and went through those buildings had this fire, so that even if you sleep on a bed of cinder blocks and plywood, it was a small thing, because there was a bigger vision, there was a bigger, greater desire to learn the practice, to be able to understand ourselves, to be able to free ourselves. So commitment is an element that is very important. I feel that first of all, the commitment to want to free ourselves, want to liberate ourselves, and to heal ourselves. That commitment has to be kept alive. And also the commitment to community living. This is, I guess, for the residential community. But I feel right now, as I follow the many things that are going on in our world right now, there's also this need to take refuge in community, and I see it everywhere. There's this awakening that communities are important, and that each of us, we need a community to take refuge in. And I remember for me, first coming to live in the Plum Village community, it was not easy at all. Because I felt there was this clash between my upbringing, you can say kind of my learning or indoctrination of individualism, and then suddenly to plunk myself, to land myself in a community where there are different principles. You have to live by different principles. So I felt there was always this clash between the individual and the collective. This clash between individualism and community living. I was so used to kind of just looking out for myself, looking out for myself. So whether it is about ideas or my well-being or my rights, etc., I was so used to looking out for myself. And then in community, do my rights matter? No. We have to look differently. What are, it's no longer individual, living in community, because happiness is no longer an individual matter. And actually it never was, but we just had the illusion. I just had the illusion that it was. Happiness is an individual matter. But definitely in community, you learn this really quickly. Happiness is not an individual matter. Especially, we have many practices that help us to see this. Like, the first thing is rooming, having a roommate. That was one of my biggest suffering. So when I first signed up to come to Plum Village, I signed up for a single room with a private bathroom. And then when I came, I discovered there were no single rooms and no private bathrooms. So that was my first great suffering, landing in Plum Village. And there was just no way to negotiate it. So I soon had to learn how to share bathrooms and learn how to share a room with other people who were complete strangers to me. And I was extremely uncomfortable with that. I didn't know how to navigate it. And actually, the first few days I suffered so much, but surprisingly, by day 5, day 6, I was already rooted in that way. Somehow, I was getting used to sharing a room with strangers, and it was just amazing to me how I could sleep in a room with a complete stranger, whom I've never met before in my entire life, and yet we both slept quite deeply, sharing the same oxygen, and it kind of blew my mind. So community living, just how Plum Village is set up, kind of helped me to slowly erode that training that I had in individualism, in a very natural way. So the rooming, being on rotation, or having to work together with other people in a garden. Shovel, I remember I had to shovel dirt and, garden soil. And then one time we were assigned to shovel gravel, move some gravel and there are many potholes here in Plum Village, and you can see it. So that was one of my jobs, and it gave me the greatest joy to be able to do that, just to shovel gravel and to fill up these. Wherever there was a puddle, we just threw gravel in. And it was my first time in my life holding a shovel and shoveling gravel. So I was quite happy about that, and also being able to work with someone else on that project. And I remember it was something so simple. All you had to do is put gravel in a wheelbarrow and wheel it to the place, and you fill it in. But actually, it was a lot more complicated. I had to work with this other person who had a different way of shoveling. And also filling the potholes, there were different principles. And I had no idea. It's like, oh, you should make the edges squared so the gravel stays in. And so I'm like, do you? You know, I thought you just pour it in. And anyhow, it was an exercise in being together with other people and discussing different ideas. So community living, I felt joyful, but also challenging in terms of learning how not to be an individual, just not to be so much looking out for myself anymore, but how can I be more permeable to other people, not just other people's presence, but also being permeable to other people's insights and experiences. And I found that challenging, but also very rewarding. And of course, Plum Village is quite a diverse community, so we have many different kinds of divides, cultural divide, generational divide, even I would call engagement divide. Some of us are more concerned with climate issues, some of us are more concerned with human rights issues, others of us, we never grew up fighting for any issues. It's just how to put food on the table, etc. So there's all kinds of differences and divides in our community. In my novice days, it was, the fight to have brown rice and steamed vegetables on the table for every meal. There's something so simple, but the Vietnamese sisters, we don't like. We're so used to white rice. Nobody ever eats brown rice back then. Now a lot more people eat brown rice. But anyhow, back then very few people had brown rice or even whole wheat bread. I remember there's a story of Brother Phap Lu, because back then we just had the white bread, the white baguettes. One day he volunteered to make bread, and so he made white bread, but he put soy sauce in the white bread to make it look like it was whole wheat bread. And anyhow, so many cultural clashes and many different differences that we kind of, as a community, had to learn how to navigate. Now we have brown rice on the table. Now we have whole wheat bread. Now we have so many different things that come naturally. Now it looks like it's it's something we've always had. But actually, when you look at the brown rice on the serving table, you have to recognize the evolution of brown rice coming to the serving table. And if you see a table that says no sugar in the food or gluten-free, you also have to recognize the evolution of these signs that came to the table. And I feel we're still constantly learning as a community how to be with differences and how to speak about our differences. And and not just surface, there are also deeper differences as well. and some even more systemic differences in terms of culture or cultural experiences, gender experiences. So there are differences that are, you see, very on the surface, but then also there are deeper differences that our community is addressing. Colonialism or, gender. Gender inequality, things like that. And so Plum Village is kind of like a work in progress, a community that is an evolving community. And one of the things that I have been reflecting on is that as a community, Tay always said we are a body. We're not an institution. We're an organism, or we're not just an institution. We're an organism, more of an organism. And in my practice, I always have to remember this because sometimes when I recognize an issue in the community, a problem, let's say, I tend to see the Sangha as more of an institution. I forget, because this is how I'm used to relating to bigger bodies. You just see them as an institution, and it becomes very impersonal. And so my training is to not forget the humans that are in this community. And not to forget that the Sangha is a body, and it goes through tension. It has feelings that can be hurt. Because the people that make up the community can also be easily hurt. So I have to really remember this when I have expectations of the Sangha. Or that, for instance, recently we've lost 2 sisters in Lower Hamlet, in the Lower Hamlet community. One is a 17-year-old nun, so quite mature in the Sangha. And so, of course, there are reasons why someone would leave the monastic community, the monastic life, and we all find our way. We all try our best to find our happiness. And when I was younger in the community, I never paid attention to, I always paid attention to the person who left and what it was that made them unhappy and why they would leave, and just looking deeply into that. But I never paid attention to the Sangha and what is the hurt in the community when a person leaves, or what happens when someone leaves. And this time I really took some time to look at all my sisters and to be with my sisters and to really recognize the hurt that is there, some of the pain and some of the processing that needs to happen. And so it's really allowed me to recognize this truth that, the Sangha is a body. It's a living body. And it also has to be cared for. Anyhow, so today I thought, we were 1 hour in. I thought maybe for those of you who are interested in community building, to share some of the principles of community building that the Buddha has passed on to us. Some principles of that can establish togetherness or harmony in the community. It's called the 6 harmonies or the 6 togethernesses. 6, is that right? 6 togetherness. Do I have to add an S? I do have to add an S. 6 togethernesses. English is complicated. So, the 6 togetherness. It's odd to add this. It just, okay. Anyhow, because our senior editor, Sister Trudy, stood up and she's like, yes, you need the S's. So I'm putting the S's. So one is physical presence. To build a community, you have to be there, basically. Now you have online communities, but you also have to show up. But in building a physical, a community, this principle that your body, you have to be there. So we live together. And if you are, when you don't have a community whom you're living together, it could be your family, or if it's a practicing community that you meet once a week or something, you also show up. So this principle is the principle of living under one roof, being present, living under one roof. This is actually the dream of the Lower Hamlet sisters for 40 years now. How can we live under one roof? Now we're in many different roofs because of our condition right now, but our dream, 40 years old dream, is to live under one roof. And this has its advantages. It also has its challenges. First, being together, we have an opportunity to kind of cultivate or generate what we call collective energy. And we all can, like sitting in this hall, you can feel the collective energy in this hall. If I were to speak to you one-on-one, your attention would be completely different. But we are now sitting together in this hall of many people. The way we pay attention, the way we listen, is already influenced by the collective way of paying attention and listening. So that is a kind of force field, you can say. Collective energy is kind of like, is an energy, and it's palpable and you can feel it. You can feel it during the times that we do walking meditation together as a community. There's a big difference when we do walking meditation on our own, and there's a big difference when we do walking meditation as a community. And that's because the collective energy of mindfulness and concentration combined is so much greater than our very own energy of mindfulness and concentration. So we can keep our concentration much easier when we are in collective. It's like sitting meditation. When I first started, it's so hard to force myself to sit 5-10 minutes every morning, every night, alone by myself in a room, in my tent. But then sitting with community is so much easier. I could sit easily, half an hour goes by, 45 minutes goes by, and there's very little effort. So we've benefited from the collective energy. And that's why this principle of being physically present is very important in building community. Also, we can learn to show up for each other in many different ways. How can we bring joy to my brother or sister or friend? How can I understand you better? How can I support you better? How can I relate to you better? So there's so many different learnings that can happen when we are physically together in the same space. On the editorial team, we have meetings over Zoom and sometimes through emails about certain books or topics or things like that. And it takes so much effort and it creates so much misunderstanding. But as soon as we're working together in the same room, in the same office, it's like the editing goes by so much quicker, and because you can just ping off each other, and it's like that. So there's huge advantages of being physically present. So the first principle is sharing a space, being present in the same space. The second is sharing material resources. So everything in Plum Village is kind of like held in common. And none of us owns a car. We have cars, but none of us is the owner. It's the community that owns it. And the buildings, whatever you see, as far as the eye can see, it's held in common. It's held in common. And sometimes somebody can say, "Oh, this is my laptop," but actually, even that is held in common. So we share material resources, and just to keep an eye out for each other in the community, so that each one of us has enough, has enough, and also to be able to access the shared resources of the community. Like this, I saw very clearly when the purple cloud building burned, and in the first few hours we were busy, dealing with the fire, putting the fire out, and things like that. And about an hour and a half, 2 hours in, then you look at the flames and you're like, there's no way anybody's going to move back in there today. Because in the beginning, that was the hope of one sister. She thought, certainly when this fire is put out, I'm going to go back into this building and things like that. She had no idea that all of her possessions would become ashes after. So she was, and then in the morning, very quickly, we organized for our sisters to move over to this building over here. And suddenly everybody's spare toothbrushes, spare toothpaste, spare clothing, spare thermals, spare coats made it over to the house and provided for our 9 sisters who were staying there at the time. So sharing material resources happened very quick, and I was so impressed of how quickly. And also, let alone all of our friends worldwide sent support and resources, etc. So community building, sharing material resources is very important. We also don't have bank accounts, individual bank accounts. Everything is held in common. And this really helps us to kind of, not feed into that desire to own things or accumulate or etc. It frees up so much energy in terms of trying to measure your success by how many numbers are in your bank account, for instance. So we don't have to deal with that. when we share material resources. So the third principle is sharing the same ethical principles. So we have the 5 mindfulness training, the 14 mindfulness trainings for the order of community, order of interbeing community. And then we have the 250 precepts, mindfulness trainings. These ethical principles for us would be our mindfulness trainings. So we have 5 for anyone who would like to commit to practicing them. I hope you've had a chance to read them for all of you who are new. Yes? Okay, good. So we have the 5, the 14, 250 for the monks, the 10 for novices, 250 for monks, and 342 for the nuns. Pardon? 342. Pardon? Someone's telling me it's 348. I don't remember the number 348. I think it's 342. New one somewhere. So ethical principles that we share. And if we did not share these mindfulness trainings, this commitment to practicing the mindfulness trainings, we wouldn't be a community. There's nothing holding us together across all of our cultural differences, across our generational differences, across our engagement differences. We wouldn't have something in common to hold us all together. And so we have ways to also keep these ethical principles alive in our community. That's something also very important in community building. So it's not just a code of conduct or etc. that you come up with together and it's hidden in your law books or something like that, or you have to look up somewhere, or you just post somewhere and leave alone. But in our community, we have a practice of reciting them at least once every 2 weeks. So if you've received, that's why if you've received the 5 mindfulness trainings, you're encouraged to recite them at least once a month, at least. But that recitation keeps the ethics of the community alive, and also alive and applied. So it's not just something that you agree with, and oh yeah, that's good, But then in our daily life, we live as we please. And only when something goes wrong, then we refer to these things. It's not like that. So being able to recite them regularly keeps these ethics alive. So principles of community building, you have to have this element, shared ethical principles. And the 4th is sharing insights and views. And this is how our community continues to grow, because insight is not something that is static, it is living and it is evolving. And it is not any one person who holds insight, who has insight, but so many of us, we have different insights into many different things. Insights into the teachings, insights into the practice, insights into our lives, and we have to be able to share them openly. And it's not a competition. Oh, I'm not going to share my insights to you, because what if you take it and build an app with it or something like that? No, we in community building, we want to be able to share our insights and grow together from our practice. And the insights we share is based on our experiences, our lived experiences. So it's not just something that we repeat from textbooks or, it's not just Buddhist principles that you repeat and things like that, but it's teachings that you have learned and then you have applied in your life, and then you share your insight into those teachings together. I think this is how the scientific community also thrives, sharing insights openly. I'm not sure if nowadays it works like that anymore, given so many corporations involved and so many people wanting to profit from scientific discovery, so everything is like kept hidden. I remember reading this one book on I forgot the name of the book, but it was written by Eric Crandall, and he's kind of a prominent neuroscientist. And in the beginning of the book, he shared so many of his insights freely. And I remember at the end of the book, when he spoke about his work with pharmaceutical companies, suddenly there were no more insights. Like it just seemed like he was keeping his understanding secret. Anyhow, here we want to be able to share our insights and views, and we get that experience in Dharma sharing, for instance. It's freely given and shared. And the fifth is I guess sharing from the heart. We do this in Dharma sharing as well. So this is, in the classical version, you would see it as harmony of views, and this is harmony of thought. So for instance, in a meeting or something like that, we would apply these to sharing our real experiences and our understanding, so that we can come to a harmony of views and thinking in the community. Also to make decisions together based on our needs, based on what it is that is alive for us at the moment. So sharing from the heart is one principle. And then the last principle is compassionate speech. Building community, we really need this. So how can we speak? Using words that would contribute to harmony in the community. So we might have an issue with the community, but like I said, the community, the Sangha, is also a body, and it can get easily hurt. I also feel that sometimes. For instance, you're not doing enough for all the wars that are going on in the world. What are you doing? Why aren't you talking to the government? Like, we can. Something like that. So if you have a complaint to make for the community, please remember compassionate speech. We are humans in this community. So these 6 principles of togetherness is kind of what helps us to build a sustainable community. And these 6 principles are what the Buddha had instructed the monastic community on, in order to help to build more harmony, a more sustainable, cohesive, and harmonious community. Oh yeah, one more thing about compassionate speech I've learned recently is that speaking in such a way that doesn't other, that doesn't I think, maybe, yeah, that doesn't matter. For instance, one time I heard an announcement about some activity, and the announcer said, "Oh, for those who care, you're invited to go to this activity." That kind of speech is a bit divisive, because what you're saying is, those who come to this activity are those who care, and those who don't come to this activity are those who don't care. And that is very divisive in a community. So just as we are practicing the 6 togethernesses, to kind of be more aware of our speech. Is it divisive? How are we speaking about the community? Is our speech about the community divisive, or is it adding to harmony and understanding? Okay. Well, so these are the Buddha's 8 principles for building community. Would you like to hear what Eleanor Ostrom's 8 principles of building community are? She's a more modern, well, she's not here anymore, but she also had what are called core design principles, and they're very much, when I look at the 8 core design principles for building community or keeping a group healthy, I often kind of put them side by side with these 6 principles of 6 harmonies. So in Eleanor Ostrom's version, who's a philosopher, I think she was an economist as well, and she had 8 core design principles for managing the commons, but it could also be applied to living in community. And one is, maybe I just read them. Would they be interesting to you? Okay, I'll write them. Having a strong group identity and purpose. And it's not written here, but like I shared in the beginning, the group identity and purpose. The purpose of is to get of a community, Plum Village community or monastic community or practicing community, is to get a breakthrough, is to heal, is to understand, is to love. And it's that fire, the bodhicitta that I was speaking about in the beginning. That would be our group identity. We are here to heal ourselves and to help others heal. Very simple. 2 is fair distribution of costs and benefits. Well, very similar. Material resources, sharing material resources. 3 is fair and inclusive decision making. This is already embedded in our the precepts of Plum Village, our monastic code. It is already embedded in the way we make decisions together. For instance, if we say fair and inclusive, does it mean that everybody in Plum Village gets to make every decision together? No. It depends on what your precepts body is. Like if you were a fully ordained monk, then when the monks meet, they can say all the novices are not included in that meeting or decision because you have a different precepts body, because you have a different body of ethics. So when we're relating to each other, it is not, For instance, if you take the 5 mindfulness trainings and you've committed to a life of veganism, and then your family is still completely non-vegan, you can't force them to be vegan, or you can't talk about, a vegan way of life. You see, it's not relatable. So we have to have a shared body of ethics in order to have the voting power in the community. In order to have the voting power, you have to have shared ethics. So the 4th one is monitoring of agreed behaviors, agreed upon behaviors. So how do we keep each other accountable? And also it's written in our monastic code how to do this. And as a community, we also have different bodies looking into how do we monitor. We have safeguarding principles as well in the lay as well as monastic community. 5 is graduated sanctions. Please warn me before you kick me out, basically. Or please warn me before you punish me. Graduated sanctions for misbehavior. However, there are certain behaviors in Plum Village that there's 0 tolerance, and you can guess which. So if it's just discovered one time, then you would be asked to leave. For instance, if we have to keep the children who come here safe. We have to keep the adults who come here safe. So there are actions that we have 0 tolerance. And then there are other behaviors that we can warn. We can give, please, if you continue to cause difficulties and for everybody in your working team, your rotation team will ask you to leave, something like that. Anyhow, the conversation might be a lot more skillful than how I'm putting it right now. 6 is fast and fair conflict resolution. Of course, we are beginning a new practice, which is a part of the principle of compassionate speech. We have to be able to address difficulties in the community quickly and fairly. And then the 7th principle is the authority to self-govern. In a thriving community, you have to have the right to be able to come up with the kind of rules and regulations that would keep the community healthy, because it's an evolving community. And so you have to be able to have the right to self-govern. And through the years, our ethics, our ethical principles have evolved because the suffering in the world has evolved. It looks a lot different now than it does 2,500 years ago. So our precepts, our ethics have also evolved. And the way we handle things have also evolved. And that is thanks to the ability to be able to come up with different rules and ways of being together that would bring about more harmony. The 8th principle from Eleanor, I'll write her name, Eleanor Ostrom. So these are called quotes. core design principles. The eighth is being able to nest in a bigger community or appropriate, I think that's how you spell it, relations with other groups. Plum Village is many of the practices and teachings you find in Plum Village are known and developed by our teacher, but also based on the core teachings of the Buddha in the monastic community. But also Plum Village belongs to the larger Buddhist community worldwide, for instance. So there's like a nesting. It's nested. And also, we have, I don't know how many centers now, 12, 15 centers worldwide. But also, beyond the center, we have a global community, multifold community. So it's nested, and it relates to a bigger body. Anyhow, if you find community building interesting, these are some of the design principles, whether it's from the Buddha's time, the 6 togetherness or 6 harmonies, or from more modern take from Eleanor Ostrom. This, I think the language of this is adapted by David Sloan Wilson. But they are the 8 core design principles. So whether building community, you can take experiment with these design principles in building community, starting with the fire that you have to connect, to understand. And yesterday, the Sisters of Lower Hamlet, we had a deep listening session. We had one on Monday, and also another one yesterday, about 2 hours each session. And we were able to listen to all of our sisters just share from their heart what's been going on, some of our deep suffering at this time, some of our biggest concerns, some of what we are going through at this moment after the house burned down or after the leaving of our sisters. So we had a chance to be together and share from the heart, and also share insights and views. And at the end, Sister Gina, she shared something very beautiful, and it was a beautiful reminder for all of us. She said that the Sangha is, of course, an imperfect Sangha, imperfect community. And that Tay had always reminded us that although it's an imperfect community, it is good enough. So the Sangha is an imperfect community, but that's already good enough. And I remember in one time when there was a bit of disharmony between the brothers and sisters in Blue Cliff Monastery, and we had to sit together with Tay to kind of listen to each other, deep listening as well. And in the end, Tay also said, yes, we are an imperfect community, but look, with this imperfect community, look at how much you are already able to do. Look at how many people you are already able to help. Let alone if there was even more harmony in the community, how much more you would be able to help. And it's interesting, he never said, let alone if you were a perfect community. He just said, let alone if there was more harmony in the community, how much more we would be able to help. And yesterday, Sister Gina's formulation of it was, well, we are an imperfect community, and Tay has always reminded us that an imperfect community is good enough. And because we are an imperfect community, this is Sister Gina's addition, and because we are in an imperfect community, that's why we can be a part of this community. She said, because we are an imperfect community, that's why I feel I can be a part of this community, because I too am imperfect. So I would just end with that in terms of community building, and I wish everyone a lot of happiness in building community together.